Yeah. Okay. So today I'll talk about this Toxic Substance Control Act of USA, and I try to give you a short update. It's a very complex and extensive act, and I'll just cover the things that matter to mostly the non-American companies. How do they need to prepare and plan for this? So I'll take my presentation from here. Yeah. Um, so Toxic Controlled Substance Act basically was set up in 1976, and its primary job, it empowers the European Environmental Protection Agency of USA to seek reporting from the companies who are using substances, maintain the records of the substances that are used or handled by them. If required, impose testing requirements where it is applicable, and we'll see how it is applicable in which situation. And in certain cases, there may be restrictions, and then that has to be enforced by the Environmental Protection Agency. Yeah. This act is applicable to substances and substances mixtures, as well as there is a definition for new and existing substance, and TSCA is applicable to both new and existing substances. Obviously, the primary objective is to control the risk posed by unreasonable risk posed by the substances, and that's the key objective. And this is more or less a sort of an alternative to REACH in US, but I mean it's quite different, and it's quite sort of reaches certain things are more extensive, whereas in TSCA there are other things which are more extensive. So I can't really compare here, but this has been existing much before REACH came into force. So, I mean, what does this? I mean, there are certain things that it initially was planned to regulate, and there was primarily the PCBs, the polychlorinated biphenyls, and there was a marking and labeling requirement which it regulates. It also regulates storing, packaging, and importing of the PCBs to the US facility, and how it is disposed. And more importantly, it also maintains a log of facilities within US which are having PCBs beyond 45 kgs in their storage, or they have transformers that have PCBs, or there are capacitors of a large size which are in number more than 50. So these are the type of things that are normally managed by was regulated by TSCA. There is also requirement for the old homes, the old houses which have lead-based paints. I mean, that's where it has been regulated under TSCA in the beginning. And this also looks into the vulnerable population area, I mean, access and exposure, like children occupied facilities and etc., like schools, etc. Yeah. So the lead is also regulated, PCBs are regulated under this, and asbestos in the same way. Again, asbestos handling, transportation, and disposal of asbestos containing material are basically controlled in this particular way, and they have guided that what should be and what should not be done in case when you have a asbestos in the facility, in your premises. Then again, the radon measurements in the buildings, and if there are unsafe level of exposure, then there are guidelines on how do we need to protect yourself. So these are, I mean, general things that were there, but I will like to go to the full TSCA titles. There are around 6 titles, and title 2 to 6, which is the 5 main type of pollutants that was being addressed earlier, but now we'll be mostly focusing on the title 1, which is control of toxic substance, which includes all substances, not just the asbestos or radon or lead, etc. So there is a inclusion of all the major toxic substances. And actually, the issue is that, I mean, though the term is used as Toxic Substance Control Act, but I mean, the law is applicable to all substances, whether they are toxic or not. So it doesn't really matter. So the name may be a little bit misleading there. So one of the key section of Toxic Substance Control Act is the setup of the inventory. And the inventory is updated from time to time, and it is also maintained. And basically, EPA has the job to maintain the list of chemicals that are being placed on a US market. And this is what is termed as the TSCA inventory. It is also mentioned as generally as inventory also. Now, inventory gives the basis for setting up regulations for various chemicals, and that's how the most industrial chemicals are regulated in US. Currently, there are around 86,000 chemicals in the inventory, and of which 41,500 are active substance. And what do we mean by active substance? Means that between 2006 to 2016, these substances were either manufactured, imported, or processed in United States, and therefore they are considered as active. And the other, 40,000 odd substances are inactive substances, which are yet in the inventory today. So, what is a chemical substance according to the inventory? The chemical substance is a organic or inorganic substance of a particular molecular identity, including any combination of these substances occurring in whole or part as a result of chemical reaction, occurring in nature, and any element or uncombined radical. Okay, so that's the definition of chemical substance being used in the TASCA. And the inventory normally divides the substances into these four categories. Yeah. So any substance that has been reported or notified into the inventory are identified as organic, inorganic, polymers, and UVCB. So the chemical substance with unknown variable composition and complex reaction product or biological material. So that's in short called as UVCB. So these are the categorization. So your substance, when it's reported on the inventory, it will be given one of these sort of tag. So TASCA inventory also excludes some of the things. So what is excluded in TASCA is basically pesticides. All sorts of pesticides that are used for specific pesticide application are not covered in the inventory. The food and food additives are not covered in the inventory. Drugs, cosmetics, tobacco and tobacco products, and nuclear materials and related products, the radioactive products. Yeah, they are not included. But very important thing is that even though they are not included, there is a negative certificate that has to be disclosed by the handler or the importer of these substances which are exempted. And I'll come back to I'll just take that up in the next slide. What does it mean? So the import of any substance requires two types of declaration. I mean, one of them, there are two types of declaration. Either there is a positive certificate statement or negative certificate statement. And these are standardized statement. What it means is positive certificate statement means that when you import a substance, then you say that either the substance is in the TASCA inventory and it meets all the rules and regulations and orders that are in place on the date of importation. So it complies with all requirements. So that is when the substance is included in the inventory and it is not an exempted substance within TSCA. The second thing is the negative certificate statement. This means that you have to declare that this particular chemical has been exempted, and therefore we have no obligations under TASCA. There are standard statements which you can see on my screen that has to be given, and these have to be submitted on an online portal by the importer well in advance to the authorities. I mean, this is normally submitted to the EPA. So what does it mean to be on the inventory? Once you are on the inventory, your substance is on the inventory, then it is categorized as existing substance, which is very similar to many other inventories around the world. What does it mean? And not on the inventory, then obviously it is considered as a new substance. It also is important that when your substance is on the inventory, then it may have a flag, which may indicate either certain manufacturing or use related restrictions. So either there is a restriction on your manufacturing of that substance or on the certain uses of the substance. So the inventory also indicates, in addition to being existing on the US market, but it also says what type of restrictions it may have. And actually, it's very important and maybe a good practice that whenever you are importing or placing anything into manufacturing or placing anything into the US market, to check that substance is already existing on the inventory. And if it is not, it's important that it has to be notified to EPA, and there is a requirement of pre-manufacturing notice that has to be given to EPA 90 days before you start the activity. And at least 90 days. Yeah. So that is a main requirement. And if you are not informing before the in the given requirement, in the way that is required, you may end up with certain penalties and enforcement requirements. Yeah. So what is it requires? Well, the pre-manufacturing notification requires what? So this is the format, or this is the type of information that is required. One is the detailed description and identification of the chemical. So what is the chemical identity, structure, formula, process diagram, manufacturing process, that has to be having a diagram as well as a little bit of description, so that clearly indicates what type of process your substance is being handled, is produced by. Production volume, are you making it in low volume, large volumes, what type of volume, tonnage grade, band that you're using, so that has to be described. Byproducts and impurities have to be defined. Uses of the substance have to be explicitly mentioned, what type of uses, which type of industry sector it has been used on. Environmental release, pollution, that also have to be elaborated. Disposal practices, what type of any guidance on disposal that may be applicable. Human exposure, the type of human exposure that is expected of this substance, dermal, oral inhalation, or through which type of application, maybe that has to be given. And then any other available data on human health or environment that is available in the public domain, that has to be submitted through the manufacturing in the pre-manufacturing notification. Once this pre-manufacturing notification is submitted, then they will be reviewing it, and based on what has been reviewed, then they will give you a final decision. Certain things are excluded from pre-manufacturing notification. If it is a naturally occurring material, but it was not listed on the inventory, so then you don't have to yet do a pre-manufacturing notification. Product of incidental reaction. So basically, it's not intended, but it's incidental reaction product. So therefore, it can be also excluded. Product of end-use reaction. So that is, again, it's not during the production, but when the final use is being done, at that stage there is a reaction and there is something which is created, but that product is not being that does not need a pre-manufacturing notification. Mixtures are excluded, but obviously components of the mixture are not. Impurities, byproducts, substance manufactured solely for export, and non-isolated intermediates. These are all excluded from pre-manufacturing notification. Obviously, that means that if you're manufacturing in US and you're intending to export the entire volume to, say, a non-US country, then basically you don't need to do the pre-manufacturing notification. So you can start your manufacturing on the day you want it. And substance formed during the manufacture of an article, those substances are also exempted from pre-manufacturing notification. So what? So basically, there's another aspect in the TSCA, the Toxic Substance Control Act, which is called significant new use rules. Yeah, this is an important aspect, because there in this particular case, this is applicable to an existing substance also. Pre-manufacturing notification, what I was talking till now, was in context of new substances that are not on the inventory. But the significant new use rules are applicable to existing substance, but they have new uses that were not there earlier. And for that, again, there is a 90 days prior notification it's required. It is very similar to pre-manufacturing notification. So this is applicable to existing substance with new uses. Yeah. What do you mean by significantly new use? New use, basically, it means is that either the volume of the chemical substance is going to be increased because of the new use. The impact of the use, the type and form of the exposure, basically, is it going to, the exposure may change, maybe in the way you are, the substance is currently being exposed, and maybe just only by inhalation. But now, there are other reasons. Maybe there is an oral exposure in this particular case, and that is where it needs to be verified and validated. Impact of the use on the magnitude and duration. So, is the duration increased? Is it continuous? It is intermittent? It's half of the day, 6 hours, 2 hours, whatever that duration is. What is the length of the duration, and what is the magnitude of exposure? That is important. And then basically the process of manufacturing. This is what as these are the basis on which the significant new use are identified, and then based on that you need, if there is a change in new use, you will have to do a 90 days pre-manufacturing notification to the European Environmental Protection Agency. So once you have notified the pre-manufacturing notification and it has been reviewed, so if it has been okayed for you to start your manufacturing, then basically manufacturing means also includes import. In TSCA, manufacturing is every time inclusive of imports. So the word manufacture is defined as import, I mean, manufacturing, producing, processing, and import. That is how it is defined in TSCA. So whenever I'm saying manufacturing, it is also inclusive of imports in that case. So once the TSCA has approved your notification, then you have a possibility to start your production, and within 30 days of your starting of production, you have to inform to the manufacturing authority that, I mean, basically that it is called as notice of commencement of manufacturing, which is 30 days, within 30 days have to be given to the EPA. So that is but in certain cases, you don't have to update this information on the inventory when it is a low volume exemption. Basically, when low volume means less than 10 tons per annum. Yeah. So in those situations, you don't have to, I mean, it won't be updated in the inventory. Low release or low exposure exemptions that are applicable. If there are only test, I mean, the substance is used for only certain test cases or trials, basically, then it's exempted. Substance used for research and development, that's exempted. And polymers that are according to 1995 polymer exemption rules, they are also exempted and they won't be updated into the inventory. So whenever your pre-manufacturing notice has been reviewed and approved, based on that and your commencement of manufacturing, the inventory will be updated with this substance, and this will no longer be a new substance and to become a existing substance. So another thing is that all existing substance that are in the TSCA inventory has to also do a chemical data reporting. And what is a reportable chemical substance? The chemical substance that are domestically manufactured or imported into US. Yeah. And they are listed in the inventory, but they are not exempted according to a special clause, which is section 40 of the TSCA. Yeah. So these substances, most of the substances have to be, there's a chemical data reporting requirement. There is a threshold, production threshold, on which the reporting becomes essential or compulsory. That is on the screen, as you can see, greater than 25,000 pounds. If the substance is manufactured on a particular year, then it becomes necessary. Normally the chemical data reporting is required on a 4-year cycle basis, and so every 4 years you will have to update your reporting on chemical on a particular substance, and it has to be given for each of the substance that you are placing on the US market. So this primarily chemical data reporting is different from the inventory reporting, because inventory is mostly volume and the substance availability in the market already or not, existing or new. But here it is more related to exposure details, the type of exposure, the quantity of the substance used, and the nature of uses, because that defines the exposure of the substance to the population and the environment. And that is why this is required, and every 4 years you'll have to update this. Based on this information that you provide, then there is an evaluation procedure that happens within the TSCA. Then there is a risk screening and the risk assessment and chemical prioritization, and based on prioritization there may be a risk evaluation and risk management activity. So this is the so CDR leads to the what you call as the evaluation phase in TSCA. So this is a simple diagram which shows that, I mean, how do you prioritize? Basically, once the substance has been identified for a high volume and maybe it has a major exposure based on your chemical data reporting, then basically these substance may be categorized as high or low priority. And depending if it is a high priority substance, obviously it will go for a second stage of activity, which is risk evaluation. Within risk evaluation, under the section 4 of the TSCA, they may demand for additional testing and additional data requirement. And this data requirement will be used to do the evaluate the risk. And if the risks are reasonable or unreasonable, then basically it may go for risk management, and this can mean that, I mean, either restricting the substance to certain uses, or maybe eliminating it, or maybe requiring certain risk reduction measures to be implemented. So this is the process of that follows once you have done the chemical data reporting. Now, the current cycle. So 2020 is the year when you the is a fourth year. So last chemical data reporting was in 2016. So 2020 is the current year when it is the risk reporting is ongoing. So it has been ongoing since June 1st, and it's open till 30th November 2020. Yeah, and any non-American company can do the reporting through a agent, and which is very similar, has a functionality like an only representative in EU. So that an agent, US-based agent, who has to do the risk reporting for these substance, CDR reporting for this on behalf of the non-American entity. There is also an involvement that, I mean, your importer may have to join this particular type of reporting. So how do you define? So considering the production volumes, that is around greater than 25,000 pounds during each year. So if your substance was between 2016 to 2019, that means preceding 4 years, any 1 year when it has exceeded this volume, then the reporting becomes essential for you. And and this reporting basically covers annual production volume between 2016 to 2019 for all the years that you have to provide. Certain manufacturing information, which includes the company, whether it is a manufacturing company or it's a contracting or producing company. Basically, it means that if you're a toll manufacturer or you're manufacturing by yourself and placing it in the market by yourself. So that type of information has to be provided. And then the processing and use information, which includes whether the substance is going to be used by consumers, industrial use, or commercial use. So those type of information is essential when you are doing the CDR, and that has to be done before 30th of November. So basically, in this way, we have covered basic aspects of TSCA. We talked about the TSCA inventory. We talked about the significantly different new use of the substance, and the CDR reporting. So in summary, TSCA is applicable to manufacturing, including imports and existing and new substance. 90 days prior notification and pre-manufacturing notification is required for new substance, as well as the significant new use rules within significant new use rules. Yeah. So whenever you are doing any substance placing in the market, I mean, obviously you need to check whether your substance or your uses are in any of these two categories. Import certification is essential, and whether it is a TSCA substance or not a TSCA substance, you have to accordingly give a positive or negative declaration. That means you're giving a claim that you are complying with the regulation, whether it is in the inventory, and if it is not in the inventory, then you are taking an oath that this substance does not attract any requirements of TSCA. CDR cycle every 4 years, volume thresholds are applicable, use and exposure details are required, and current cycle closes in on 30th November. I have also done a small summary of the regulation, which is mostly applicable to the non-American companies, basically. So basically Section 4, which is essential, which talks about the risk and exposure of concern. So where, I mean, the testing may be required. Section 5 talks about pre-manufacturing notification for new substances. There's Section 5 also covers significant new use rules based on enhanced exposure or release of a substance of concern. So that is where, I mean, significant new use rules come into force. Maintaining TSCA inventory by the ECA and reporting onto that inventory by the relevant stakeholders, including all manufacturers, importers, and handlers of the substance. Then reporting and record keeping within the premises of the manufacturer, importers, and etc., or the handlers of the chemicals. That is Section 8 again, and Section 12B and 13, which is basically requiring the certification and reporting requirements, which I said about that self-declaration on this while importing, self-declaring whether the positive certificate or a negative certificate. So these are the key aspects of the TSCA regulation, and which are applicable to non-US companies as well as to US companies, but these are primarily from the perspective of non-US companies. So with this, I finish my presentation. Thank you very much. And for any further information on this regulation or any of the regulations that you have been listening from us during the past past four sessions, please visit gpcgateway.com. This is a place where we intend to develop more intense information on regulatory intelligence, and this is being updated from time to time. And in case you have any questions and queries, please contact us on compliance@gpcregulatory.com. And very importantly, I would like to, because this is the last presentation of these 4-session series, I would like to also emphasize a couple of things. That one of the new development that has come since we started with our first session, that was on Indian regulation, that ICMSR, Indian Chemical Rules, Management and Safety Rules. There has been a new revised draft that is come into public domain. And this draft is shortly will be available through gpcgateway.com. But what I'm saying is that there have been some certain major changes, and obviously this would modify some of the things that we have presented to you in the past. And we hope that you will. We hope that this is more or less the final draft. And but I mean, we are very glad that actually many of the suggestions that we had made based on the fourth draft have been accepted in this particular draft. And therefore, one of the main significant aspect is that the priority substance and substance subjected to registration have been merged, and all priority substance are substance subjected to registration. And this list is now 750 chemicals, and this will be updated from time to time based after the notification has been done. So there will be a development, and we'll probably have a revised sort of event on the Indian regulation because the new draft has just come in. Yeah. In addition, I mean, I would also like to mention that today we had three presentations on BPR, biocidal products, and agrochemicals. And I would like to mention that, I mean, there's a great deal of capacity on, dealing with these agrochemicals, and there's a great deal of expertise required on dealing with these chemicals. And I'm very proud to inform that our partners, Oxylife, as well as, I mean, to some extent, Chemtopia on the Korean BPR. I mean, we are very well placed in providing any services where you need. And in case you have any questions relating to it, please either drop a mail to compliance@gpcregulatory.com or any or one of the presenters' email that you have probably noted earlier.